President Biden also putting out a brand new statement. This is a good day for Israel, for the United States, and for the world. Let's bring in Mark Dubowitz, CEO of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Mark, you were listening to the vice president's statement there. First up, your reaction.
Well, look, it's a good statement, well prepared, well delivered. Unfortunately, Vice President Harris in March of this year said, I have read the maps and I oppose the Israelis going into Rafah in Gaza. And she has opposed Israeli operations. She's called, as John said earlier, for the Israelis to stop the war, agree to a ceasefire that would have kept Sinwar alive and would have kept the violence continuing. So some acknowledgement that the vice president and the president himself have been wrong to try block Israeli operations, because without that, there wouldn't have been these soldiers on the ground who fortunately encountered Sinwar and were able to get rid of a sadistic murderer.
So to that point, Mark, coming back to what I said about the crux of the statement that she made is that the war's got to end in a way that so that Israel is secure. I mean, if the war ends tomorrow or this afternoon, Hamas is still going to be in place. Hezbollah is still going to be in place. Iran will still present an existential threat to Israel with its nuclear program. And that does seem to be the one thing that the Biden administration is not realizing, that if you don't defeat Hamas in a way that it can't be reconstituted and come back, if you don't defeat Hezbollah in a way that they stop threatening Israel with more than 100,000 missiles that they likely have left even after this conflict, and if you don't end this war in a way that Iran does not continue to use its proxies to attack Israel and to also now directly attack Israel with hundreds of ballistic missiles, then this war will never end in a way that Israel can be secure. What else needs to happen in order for that statement to be fulfilled?
John, you're exactly right. Look, I mean, the Israelis live in a tough neighborhood. They live in the Mideast, not the Midwest. And they understand that, diplomacy without coercion are merely talks, concessions, and capitulation. And so what they've done is they've ignored the Biden administration, they've ignored Vice President Harris, and they've gone out to kill the enemies of America and Israel, who have, as we've said over and over again, substantial blood on their hands of our citizens, and they're holding them also hostage. So thankfully, the Israelis realize that. Now, that means that there's an opportunity for coercive diplomacy, right? Using leverage in order to get a political settlement. This has got to end with a political settlement. It's got to end with the destruction of Hamas's military and governance capabilities in Gaza, and we are further along than we were certainly 3-4 months ago in achieving that end. It's got to end with the destruction of Hezbollah's military and governance capabilities in Lebanon. And it's got to end with the Iranian regime in Tehran taking significant blows, undermining their power, and also supporting the Iranian people, millions of whom despise this regime and want to topple this regime. We have a unique opportunity to reorder the Middle East in ways that will promote American national security and promote Arab-Israeli normalization and get rid of these enemies that have been inflicting so much blood and so much violence on the region and against our citizens.
Mark, I just want to highlight the screen. We've got this live shot up there in Tel Aviv. For those wondering, obviously, we've been calling it a celebration on the ground there in Israel following the confirmation of Sinwar's death. Specifically, these are families of hostages, we are told, that are live on our TV screen right now. They're near Israel's defense ministries in Tel Aviv, calling for the release of hostages. Mark, just wanted to make sure we were really specific on what we're showing there. To the president's point in his statement, Mark, part of it reads in quote, more than 250 were taken hostage with 101 still missing. That number includes 7 Americans, 4 of whom are believed to still be alive and held by Hamas terrorists. Sinwar is the man most responsible for this. So they're obviously hoping this is an opportunity to push harder for the release of those hostages, Mark. Is this a better opportunity for them now?
It's a much better opportunity. Look, there's still a guy named Khalid Mashal who lives in Doha, Qatar. He's the head of the political wing of Hamas. He's been living there in the lap of luxury in a 6-star hotel. He's worth about $4 billion, money that he's stolen from the international community that was supposed to go to help the Palestinian people. Well, Mashal is there, and Mashal has a choice now. He can surrender on behalf of Hamas. He can order the Hamas terrorists to release the hostages. Prime Minister Netanyahu has promised to grant immunity to any Hamas leader, any Hamas fighter who does so. And Mashal can actually bring a resolution. But Mashal has a choice. He can do that, or there's two other things we can do. The first is we can force the Qataris, who've been harboring Hamas for many years, to extradite Mashal to the United States to stand trial for killing Americans. Or if he doesn't want to do that, then Mossad will find him and hunt him down and will kill him, because the Israelis will seek justice for those who have hurt, maimed, and murdered their citizens. And it doesn't matter how long it takes, they will find him. This is an opportunity to bring a peaceful resolution, or to force the Qataris, who are supposedly our great allies, who've done nothing at all to help us in this conflict, to finally get Hamas to release American hostages, Israeli hostages, and, as I say, bring a resolution to this.
To that point, I was thinking the same thing as you were, that if Mashal is now sort of the heir apparent to Sinwar. He was the head of the Hamas political wing until 2017 when Haniyeh took over, and then that mantle fell to Sinwar. But if now the focus is back on Mashal, he's got to feel almost like he's a dead man walking, because I don't think that the Mossad would go after him in Qatar. But the second that he leaves the border of Qatar, as we saw with Ismail Haniyeh, even in downtown Tehran, the Mossad will get him.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you're right. Khalid Mashal may never leave Doha. I'm not so sure the Mossad is not going to try target him there. I mean, at the end of the day, it'll have some diplomatic blowback. Well, it'll have diplomatic blowback. But look, I think the Israelis have demonstrated after October 7th, they are willing to do whatever it takes. And there's things that they may not have been prepared to do before October 7th. So Mashal may never leave. But, again, John, my preference is the United States has significant leverage over the Qataris. We have an important Air Force base there, by the way, that protects the Qataris from their enemies. And it's about time to force the Qataris to extradite Mashal. I want to see him in a courtroom in the United States of America, indicted and then convicted for killing our citizens. And then I want to see him in a maximum security prison, rotting away for the rest of his life after all of the brutal damage he's done. I think it would be fitting and poetic if he went from a 6-star hotel and $4 billion of net worth to a maximum security prison in a small cell. I think that would be poetic, and I think it would also bring, again, a measure of justice for the Americans and Israelis and others that he's helped kill and maim.
Mark, to continue to update what we are hearing from officials here in the U.S., our Pentagon Press Secretary, Major General Pat Ryder, just provided a readout of his phone call with the defense minister, the Israeli defense minister, Gallant, discussing the killing of the Hamas leader, Sinwar. He reaffirms his support in that call for Israel's right to defend itself and reiterated that the deployment of the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense THAAD represents the U.S. unwavering, enduring, and ironclad commitment to Israel's security. The secretary also expressed strong support for the immediate release of all remaining hostages and a ceasefire in Gaza. So this is the messaging that we're hearing from U.S. officials upon his death, and we await word from the president, which will be an important moment in all of this, Mark.
Yeah, look, Sandra, I think these expressions of support are very important. Obviously, it's a very close U.S.-Israel alliance for many years. But we have to also be somewhat measured in our praise of the administration. Look, it was only a few days ago the Biden administration was threatening to cut off ammunition and weapon sales to the Israelis. They've done that multiple times in the past 12 months. It's very interesting, but the brigade that was responsible for killing Sinwar was made up of these young soldiers. Some of them were secular, so a 19-year-old young sergeant 9 months into his service who supposedly killed Sinwar. But this may not have been publicly reported, but that brigade was also made up of ultra-Orthodox religious Israeli soldiers who were part of a brigade that the Biden administration was going to sanction only a few months ago. So it's sort of very interesting in terms of the symbolism and the praise, but one has to be, again, measured in how we respond to the president, the vice president, the secretary of defense's fulsome comments, because, again, there's been multiple times throughout this war where they've really tried to undercut the ability of the Israeli defense forces to take the fight to our collective enemies.
Mark, thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.